Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today we have a big show. It's a lot of NBA talk. We're going to be doing, like I said, we're going to break down all of the NBA action from over the weekend, including all three series that went final. We're going to talk about their last game, and we're going to do some Western Conference and Eastern Conference predictions as far as the conference finals go. So stick around for that. But before we get into all of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message will pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. Appreciate anything that you do give. Once again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. It's on the screen. It's scrolling across the bottom, on the bottom scroll there throughout the whole show. But leave a comment, leave a donation. Appreciate everything you do give. And let's get right into it. Like I was saying, lots of history was made in the Game 7's on Sunday. In fact, both of those two Game 7's were historic in their own right for two different reasons. And we're going to start out in the Eastern Conference. We're going to start in the East, where the Pacers shocked the world by taking down the Knicks. Now, that's from the beginning of the series. If you remember back to the beginning, everyone was saying the Pacers have no chance, Knicks in 5. A lot of things transpired to get to even Game 7. The Knicks dealt with a lot of injuries throughout. In fact, at one point in this series, if you include action in Game 5, or in Game 7, all 5 of the Knicks opening day first game of the season starters were out for at least a portion of a game. Of a game. You know, OG Anunoby missed Game 2 to Game 6. Josh Hart missed basically the entirety of Game 6. Jalen Brunson missed the last quarter or so of Game 7, although at that point the game was basically over. Mitchell Robinson missed a whole lot of that series, and Julius Randle missed the entire playoffs. So that's the entire starting roster, not to mention Bojan Bogdanovic, who was hurt as well. So the Knicks were dealing with a lot of injuries. But that's not the reason they lost this game. The reason that they lost this game is because of the Pacers shooting. Not only was the Pacers shooting incredible, which it was, but it was historic. It was historic shooting by the Indiana Pacers, the best shooting performance in a playoff game of all time. They shoot 67% from the field. They had the best shooting half of all time as well, shooting 76% in the first half. They put up 70 points in the first half, 60 points in the second. And this is the kind of game where it doesn't matter how good you play on the other end. And it's not like the Knicks played bad. They didn't. They just, when the other team is not missing shots, you can't, there's not much you can do to control the outcome of these games. And it really is unfortunate because the Knicks played a good game. They really did. I mean, you look at DiVincenzo scored almost 40 points in this game. They were in a normal game 109 points and, shooting 42% from the field, 37% from 3. That's going to at least keep you in it. Now, did the Knicks play good enough to win this game or this series? Probably not. And that's not entirely their fault. Again, They're playing on an incredibly injured. Their team is incredibly injured. Alec Burks was their second best player last night. Last night. Last night was Sunday. He was their second best player last night, and that's it's not the spot you want to be in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference semifinals. That's not where you want to be, and it's not the whole reason they lost. Again, the reason they lost Game 7 is because of the Pacers' incredible shooting. You don't shoot, 67% from the field, set a new NBA record for shooting from the field, and lose a game. That just simply does not happen. It doesn't, and it's incredibly impressive what they did. Tyrese Halliburton probably had his best game of the series. He made 6 threes, 26 points. Was pretty efficient too. Had 6 assists. And then really this entire series, some of the main factors had been TJ McConnell off the bench and Obi Toppin off the bench, providing both energy and defense. In TJ McConnell's case, especially down the stretch in those last couple games, his ability to come in and give those defensive minutes against Jalen Brunson was huge. And this brings up a little bit of a bigger conversation that I've been hearing around sports media, especially NBA sports media, is the way that Tibbs coaches his team, and we all know it. It's the way he does it. He'll have his starters out there for 40 minutes. It just hasn't really led to success in the playoffs. He's gotten teams to the Eastern Conference Finals. He's gotten teams that are really good, really successful, and he's never won. Tom Thibodeau is the kind of coach that you are that at least for me, I'm a little perplexed by when I talk about the way that he coaches, because it's not always the worst idea to have your best out. It's not the worst idea to have your best guys out there. You want to have your best guys out there because that's how you win a game. Your best guys are out there on the court. It's good, right? But on the flip side, you have your guys out there and they're tired, especially if they do this over a 6-game series and then a 7-game series. That's 13 straight games where these guys are playing playoff intensity level basketball and playing 40 plus minutes of it. It leads to what we've seen, leads to injuries. Josh Hart is a guy who plays with so much effort, so much, no pun intended, heart here, but you see that abdominal strain. That's the kind of thing that, your just abdominal muscles gave out. It's not really like an injury that he gets hit and it happens. There's not really a way to fix that. And he's out there, he gives 37 minutes, he plays fine basketball, and he's clearly not 100%, but he still gives it all his all. But now a not 100% guy in Josh Hart is going up against, the starters at first, and maybe they start to win that, and then the reserves come in, and maybe they're still hanging in there, but then the starters come back, and these guys have been on the court the whole time, and they're starting to get tired. These guys are starting to get gassed, especially after a long playoff streak like this, where they're continuing to play at high intensities, high effort minutes over and over again. And I know these are professional athletes. They have the endurance to do it, but sometimes it's nice to get a break. You're getting beat up. It's a physical sport. No matter what they tell you, basketball is a very physical sport, especially down low, and it starts to take a toll. Now, this Knicks team is very good, right? And the Pacers are moving on to the Eastern Conference Finals. In our next segment, we're actually going to break down the Eastern Conference Finals, so I'll get more to the Pacers in a second. But I want to do a little send off to the Knicks here. The Knicks are a very good team, and part of sports is luck, right? No matter how you slice it, a huge part of sports is luck. There's a saying, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, and it's a real thing. Because the Indiana Pacers, a big criticism of their playoff run so far is the injury luck that they've had. They run into a Bucks team that doesn't have Giannis and doesn't have Dame for a lot of the series. They run into a Knicks team that doesn't have all 5 of their opening day starters for at least part of the series. And now they're running into a Boston team that doesn't have Kristaps Porzingis for however long he's going to be out. Hamstrings are nagging injuries, so we'll have to see if and when he can come back. I expect that he'll be there for the series, but there's only one real way to know, and that's for an official report to come out. But all that's besides the point. The Knicks got unlucky. And this is, when healthy, a championship level roster. I mean, you saw what they did with basically just the Nova Knicks, right? You had Jalen Brunson leading the team. Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo, who might not even be starting if this roster was fully healthy. OG Anunoby, when he's healthy, is OG Anunoby, when healthy, is one of the best perimeter defenders in the league, and Isaiah Hartenstein stepped up huge. He's going to earn a payday. He's a free agent, and it's a huge thing that the Knicks need to re-sign Isaiah Hartenstein in this offseason. But then you're also getting guys back like Mitchell Robinson, who might not be your starting center, but is a great size piece and is a great rim protector down low, and Julius Randle, who is a great post scorer and can take your guy outside. He's very physical down low, and I mean this roster has 5, 6, 7 starters on it, right? It when fully healthy. This is a championship level roster. Not even to mention McBride, who has his moments. Now he wasn't particularly efficient in Game 7, 0 for 6 from 3 in 40 minutes of play, but he's a rookie. He's a young guy. He's starting to make that impact, and it's nice to see. But this Knicks team is very good, and they have some holes they need to fix in the roster. But it's harder to see their holes because of how injured they were, and they're a really good team when they're not hurt. I really think that they're a team that could take the Celtics if they were fully healthy. Now, in shambles like they are right now, in multiple pieces, dealing with the injury bug, they wouldn't have given the Celtics a series, I don't think. Even with Jalen Brunson, if he continued his magical run, that kind of cooled off there in the last couple games, but it's not really a run that you can expect Jalen Brunson night in and night out to keep up his 40-point performances. But this Knicks team is good. Don't be discouraged if you're a Knicks fan. I know this loss stings because you're definitely a better team than the Pacers, but the Pacers got lucky. And that's just a part of sports sometimes. You know, some of the greatest athletes, some of the greatest teams never won because luck is a part of it. And unfortunately, the Knicks drew the short straw on this one. We'll see if the Pacers' luck can continue. We're actually going to break that down coming up next in segment number 2. We're going to do an Eastern Conference Finals breakdown between the Pacers and the Celtics. So stick around for that. We'll be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Everybody in the world down. Please, Lord, give me a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I'll make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up in the basement. Statement. The time is so vacant. I don't need shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Beating my way in the beat put down. It ain't replaced on this my town. I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the music fits, the losing shit. A stupid man. If you choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished breaking down the Pacers' historic night, taking down the Knicks in a Game 7 where they broke the record for best shooting in the history of the playoffs, shooting 67.1% from the field, 76.3 in the first half. Both of those breaking the NBA playoff record. Incredibly impressive effort on the road in Game 7. In this segment, though, we're going to break down if they can continue that, because they are heading into a game against the Boston Celtics, or series against the Boston Celtics, that no one expects them to win. Much like against the Knicks, no one expected them to win. So we're going to do a little bit of an Eastern Conference Finals breakdown between the Celtics and the Pacers here in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message will pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you have a burning question about sports, anything that you would like me to cover, talk about overall in the world of sports, let me know. I will go ahead and cover that. Leave a comment, leave a donation at gsmcpodcast.net. The link is on the screen currently. It's also scrolling across the bottom of the screen at all times during the show. So leave a tip or donation. Appreciate anything you do give. But like I was saying, here in this segment, we're going to talk about a little bit Eastern Conference Finals. The Eastern Conference Finals was set on Sunday. The Celtics beat the Cavaliers in 5 games, and it took 7 for the 6th seed Indiana Pacers to upset the 2 seed Knicks, the incredibly injured Knicks, as we talked about in the first segment there. But the Pacers and the Celtics. Let's talk about the numbers here. And you might say, and a lot of people are, penciling the Celtics into the finals already, as they had been for most of the playoffs, because the Celtics, generally speaking, are a tier above the rest of the Eastern Conference when it comes to offensive efficiency, defensive efficiency, record, starting 5. In general, they're just a super team compared to the rest of the East. But that doesn't mean that the Pacers don't stand a chance. People have been underestimating a team like the Pacers, and the Celtics without Kristaps Porzingis, it makes it a little bit of a different conversation, because when you look and you break down the way that both of these teams play the game of basketball, it's very similar. You know, both of these teams operate on the mindset of 3 is more than 2, right? They put up a lot of threes. The Celtics, put up maybe the most. Celtics and the Pacers put up a lot of threes. This most 3-point attempts. But you take a look at these two teams, and the Celtics defense is really the difference. You take a look at the defensive rating of these two teams, but it's a huge difference. The Celtics are a huge, much better defensive team. Excuse me, I'm sorry. But the Pacers are not. The offense is comparable. Tyrese Halliburton is not your typical scorer, and the Celtics, much like the Nuggets were at the beginning of round 2, seemingly haven't woken up yet all the way. Now, they have lost 2 games, and both of those games, the other team shot phenomenally. And as we just saw in Game 7 between the Knicks and the Pacers have that ability to just make every single shot that they put up, right? So this isn't going to be a sweep. I definitely don't think this is going to be a sweep. I think that, honestly, the Pacers might even take Game 1 out of the gate. They come out strong. The Celtics, who have been resting, aren't ready for the intensity again. And they haven't, like I said, they haven't really played too intense throughout the entire playoffs. Jason Tatum hasn't shown up entirely. Now, he has had a handful of good games, but he hasn't really been that guy that the Celtics need to rely on, that number 1 superstar that they really kind of want him to be. But it doesn't really matter. That team is so stacked. They've got Jaylen Brown. They got Derek White. They have Kristaps Porzingis when he's healthy. This team is ridiculous. They have Al Horford coming off the bench. It's almost unfair. All of that being said, this Pacers team has some kind of magic on them. They really do. And I don't know what kind of plague they're bringing into all these arenas, but they have yet to face a healthy team, and they're continuing to not face a healthy team. Like I said in that first segment, luck is a big, big part of this game, of any sport, really. Luck is a big part of it. And the Pacers have gotten lucky. The other teams that they're playing have gotten unlucky. We'll have to see how long it takes for Kristaps Porzingis to get back into the game, and if he's 100% when he comes back. But the center depth is a bit of an issue. Now, the Pacers aren't a team that are going to attack the middle too aggressively. They're an outside in kind of team. They're going to put up a lot of threes. Excuse me. Uh, and they're going to try and control. They like to play fast. Both of these teams like to play fast, so it should be a relatively high scoring game. But really, the X factor in this series is going to be, I mean, it's always health, but it's going to be Jason Tatum, right? Jason Tatum needs to be able to step up and be that number one star. Now, you could make the argument that the Celtics might not even be bothered by the Pacers. In their series this year, the Celtics are 3-2. They've split the games. It's been 1-1-1-1. Celtics won the most recently, but 3-2 are the Celtics against the Pacers this season in the regular season so far, and the Pacers show some life against them. The Pacers are a team that, as we've seen, can play up to their opponents. And they're not a team that you want to take lightly, because if you take them lightly, they're going to out-physical. They're a team that can out-physical you, and that was another big part of their win in this series. A lot outside of Game 7, I believe, all the games they won, they out-rebounded them, and they won multiple games on the road in one of the hardest environments to play in. And TD Garden isn't any easier to play in Boston, but it should be a good series. I really do think that this series could be good. I'm taking the Celtics in 6 in this one. I think that it's going to be a slow start for the Celtics. I think the Pacers are going to come out the gate hot, win game 1, possibly game 2. But when we're looking at, an overall series, I think the Celtics will wake up around game 2-ish, maybe game 3, and they should be able to put them away. As long as they stay healthy, the Pacers aren't on the same level as the Celtics. Although they do definitely have the ability to steal any game, as we saw in Game 7. Shooting 67% is just not a normal thing. So you can't rely on that every night, but they have the upside, the ability to do that. So it's not going to be a sweep. I have Boston in 6. But let me know what you think in the comments. Who's going to win Eastern Conference Finals? In the next segment, we're going to break down the Game 6 and Game 7 that's leading up to the Western Conference Finals. So stick around for that. We'll be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube, absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back, everybody, to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished breaking down the Knicks falling in Game 7 in historic fashion, and breaking down the Eastern Conference Finals between the Pacers and the Celtics. I have the Celtics in 6. Go back and listen to that if you are interested in my logic there. But in this segment here, we're going to break down a couple of the other series clinching games, this time in the Western Conference. And then we're going to break down the Western Conference Finals at the end of our show. So stick around for that if you want to hear my predictions. This segment, we're going to talk about the Mavericks' 1-point victory over the Thunder to send that 1 seed home packing. So we'll take a look at that in just a second. But before we do, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message will pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you have a burning question about sports, leave it in the comments, leave it in the donation. I will get to it as soon as I can. I appreciate everything that you do give, everybody for watching and supporting and sitting down on a beautiful Monday afternoon to talk some sports with me. But like I was saying, we are going to talk a little bit about the Mavericks and their comeback in Game 6, excuse me. A tight Game 6 to send home the 1 seed Oklahoma City Thunder, a young Thunder team, as the Dallas Mavericks head to the Western Conference Finals. The Dallas Mavericks had a huge second half comeback, outscoring the Oklahoma City Thunder by almost 20 points. They were down by They were down by almost 20 at halftime. They were down by 15 with 17 with a little bit of time left in the third quarter, and they're able to crawl all the way back. The Mavericks down the stretch played great basketball, and the Oklahoma City Thunder didn't really help themselves too much down the stretch. Now, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander played a great game, right? 36 points, 43 minutes of action. But I want to break down the end sequence of this game, because one of the things I noticed when I was watching it is, and I know Luka needs a lot of attention, I know Kyrie needs a lot of attention, but PJ Washington was left wide open in the corner for basically the entire fourth quarter, and that ends up being what does the Thunder in. There's a little bit of a drive and kick to PJ Washington in the corner from Luka Doncic. Now, he ends up getting fouled, sent to the line. They are down by 1 at that point, and he gets 3 shots. On that foul, the Thunder challenge. And I believe at the time, the Thunder had 1 timeout remaining. At the time, and they challenge it, and they lose this challenge because it was pretty obviously a foul. It's pretty obviously a foul. He hits him on the arm, and yet he's asking for a challenge here. So with 1 timeout remaining, they challenge this, and they obviously lose. Now they don't have a timeout left. The Dallas Mavericks are at the line shooting 3, and they missed that third one intentionally, right? Smart play by PJ Washington and the Mavericks to have that happen, but 2.7 seconds left on the clock. You would have liked to have that timeout remaining. You really would. It's the kind of moment where being able to collect yourself, even if the ball doesn't advance, being able to have a set play from out of bounds, being able to get it into the hands of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander rather than Chet looking for the first guy and getting it into Lou Dort's hand to take that 3/4 court shot. It's not a good situation for you to be in as a team, right? And that was one of the bigger coaching questions that I had here. And again, this Thunder run, this run for the Thunder shouldn't be understated, right? They had a really great season, a young team, a super young team, with with a lot of young talent, being the number one seed in a stacked Western Conference, taking it to 6 games against a team with Luka. They have holes to fix. They know where the holes are. They need to get a more physical presence down low than Chet, who is a really good rim protector. But when it comes to being physical down low, Daniel Gafford was bullying him all series long. And Josh Giddey probably doesn't have a place on this team anymore. But they have assets. They have the ability to go fix it. They can go out in this offseason and make a trade. They can go out in the offseason and sign the guys. They can go, and if there's someone they love in this draft, they can move up to get him, or they can. They have the assets to make a big move, and this is probably the time to do it. Your team has arrived. Now, it's a little earlier than you think it's going to be, but you have the MVP candidate in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You have a lot of other great players. Lou Dort, incredible on defense. Jalen Williams continues to show up as that bona fide number 2 option that's you'd like to have on a team. And Chet Holmgren, with his defense, his ability to stretch the floor on the offensive end as well, second in Rookie of the Year voting behind Wemby. This team's future is looking really bright. And this is the time for you to make that push. You don't have to go all in. You have enough assets to make a big trade and still have assets remaining. So this is the time for the Thunder to do something like that. The Mavericks and we'll break this down in a couple segments from now. The Mavericks versus the Timberwolves. But the Oklahoma City Thunder here, again, they're a young team. This is a successful season. This is not a season where we're going to look back on it and say, oh, it's disappointing that they didn't make it past the second round. No, they overachieved here. They were not supposed to be the 1 seed in the West. Their offense, their defense all season long has been awesome. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I mean, he was great before this season, but he took that next step into MVP caliber player this season, and you can build around that. You still have room to build. This team has a really, really, really bright future. So, all hats off to the Thunder. This should not throw a wrench in your plans. Keep your head up. Believe in yourself. You're gonna do great things, Thunder. But their run does end here. Overall, I don't agree with the challenge, and that's really my biggest gripe with what the Thunder did. I think the coaching all seasons for the Thunder has been relatively solid, but that right there, I think that really hurts. I don't know. I don't know how you. I know the idea of, hey, you don't want to send him to the line, but I mean, that was clearly a foul. Shai should have known it. He definitely hit him in the arm. There's no reason to ask for a challenge there. You just have to take it, and you don't want to put your team in a situation where, hey, 2 seconds left, we have to get this rebound and we have to just panic, put up a shot. You could make a play. You can draw up a play and give yourself a little bit of a better chance. Now, 2 seconds desperation heave is never going to give you a great chance. But I would have liked their chances a lot better if they had that timeout. Chet gets that rebound and they have the timeout. Now in that situation, PJ Washington probably doesn't purposely miss that free throw, but still, you're not going to have time to drive down the court and get a layup. You're putting up a 3 anyway, so it's still a desperation heave, game-winning attempt at that point. Anyway. The Thunder had a great season. The Mavericks continue on, and we'll talk about a little more about them in segment number 5 when we get to it. But in the next segment coming up, we are going to talk about the other historic Game 7 that happened on Sunday night between the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Denver Nuggets. The Minnesota Timberwolves coming out on top in that one in a historic comeback. We just talked about a little bit of a comeback here between the Mavericks and the and the Thunder, but this one was a historic comeback, a Game 7 historic comeback. So we'll talk about that coming up next on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we've been talking a lot of basketball. We just finished breaking down the Mavericks, moving on to the Western Conference Final. We're going to break down the historic Game 7 that has their opponents in the Western Conference Final, that being the Minnesota Timberwolves, setting a record, the largest comeback in Game 7 history. Down 20 points in the third quarter, down 15 points at halftime. That's the largest halftime deficit ever. We'll break down that game coming up in just a second, but before we do, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message will pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and anybody else around the world to see. We appreciate everybody for tuning in, listening, watching, and talking some sports with me. If you have a burning sports question, any sport, go ahead and leave it in the comments, leave a donation. I will get to it. I appreciate your comments, your questions. Let me know what you think of anything that I'm talking about here today. But like I was saying, we're going to break down in this segment here the final second round matchup, this one between the Timberwolves and the Nuggets, and as Anthony Edwards promised, it was a Game 7 to remember. It won't go as far as saying the best Game 7 of all time, but it was one heck of a game, and they delivered. Jokic was trying his best to keep them alive. He didn't have his greatest game. Neither did Anthony Edwards. Neither of their number one stars had a great game. It came from their role players, from the rest of the team that was able to come in and really make the difference. For Denver in the beginning of the game, building up that huge lead, it was Jamal Murray. Jamal Murray comes in and he leads this team, his scoring output. The way that he's making shots in the first half is huge. He does not miss seemingly in the first half. He powers them up to that lead. And like I said, Jokic, not an incredibly efficient game from him. Jokic did have 34 points, but 2 of 10 from 3, 13 of 28 from the field. He did have 19 rebounds. He was huge in the post there, but that stat line doesn't really tell the whole story, right? That stat line doesn't say everything that you want it to say when we're talking about this game. Jamal Murray powered them to this point, and he didn't really get the ball. They wanted it to run through Nikola Jokic, which in general is the way to get it done, right? That's usually how you want to run your team if you're the Denver Nuggets, the defending champs. But their offense just was not clicking down the stretch. Jamal Murray stopped making all of his shots. I think he had 2 points down the stretch of that game. You look at it kind of was the opposite for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Obviously, that's how it works. You're gonna, in a 20-point comeback, you're gonna have one team be incredibly successful and the other team kind of fall off a cliff there. But Anthony Edwards, even though he was having a tough game, stayed in there, hit a lot of clutch shots down the stretch of this contest. But the rest of the Timberwolves, I want to give a shout out to. You have the Rudy Gobert, who famously sucks at offense. Famously is very bad at offense, hitting an incredibly tough double-teamed turnaround fadeaway mid-range, nearly from the three-point arc, money. That's not a shot he normally makes. You know, Rudy Gobert really was a huge part of this game. His defense, his ability to make life hard for Jokic, even though Jokic still had 34 points, he made life hard for him. And that's not an easy thing to do against one of the greatest post finishers in basketball history. You know, his moveset, his ability to get to the rim, it was disrupted. And against Jokic, that's really the best you can hope for, disruption. And it threw him off his game. Karl Anthony Towns played a huge, huge part in this contest. He really was a massive part of what the Minnesota Timberwolves were able to do here. He got in some foul trouble again, which he does tend to do, but 23 and 12, a double-double in Game 7. 8 of 14 from the field, I believe. He only missed one shot from inside the 3-point line. So it was a great night from him. Rudy Gobert again hitting a lot of tough shots. His defensive effort as well. Again, this defense is insane. This is one of the best defenses of all time. And this is the kind of defense that can help win a championship. You remember back to some of these teams, the Pistons in the early 2000s, powered by their defense. It's a similar kind of build. You know, you have the defensive player of the year, Rudy Gobert, arguably one of the greatest defensive players of all time. A superstar in Anthony Edwards here. He is doing everything he can. I mean, he didn't have a great game. You have sixth man of the year, Naz Reid, coming off the bench, giving you 11 huge points, always providing energy, even though he's not, filling up the stats sheet. He helped power a 7-0 run down the stretch of the game with about 3 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. He helped power a 7-0 run that put them up by 10 and basically put the game away. Now, it doesn't always end pretty, but the Nuggets had a very good season, right? This is incredibly, they had a good season, but it's still incredibly disappointing for a team that is the defending champion. They just did not execute in this game, or really in this series. Three of the 4 games that they lost, they just did not execute. And that's not the way that they want to play basketball. Mike Malone, you lose the first 2 games at home. You lose Game 7 at home. And then the other loss, you get blown out by 45 points. The games that they lost, they played terribly in. There were games that they were executing at high levels, but 3 of the 4 games that they lost in, you could even make the argument for Game 1, they just didn't have it in them. They looked like they were tired, out of gas. They didn't have the ability to keep going down the stretch. And it's a little concerning. I mean, I know playoff runs are tough, right? You're going from playing in June, you get a shorter offseason than everybody else, but this Minnesota team and this Denver team, both of them didn't really make too many big changes in the offseason, And they met in the first round last season. And Denver was able to win this in 5. It was a pretty easy 5-game series too, but now they meet here. It's a hard-fought 7-game series where Denver just disappears for 3 of the 4 games, right? Disappears for halves at a time. And they had the same issue against the Lakers, but they always knew when to turn it back on, right? And they always felt like they were in control against the Lakers. But against the Wolves, that defense that was able to put pressure on them, they never really were able to figure it out. And that right there is the biggest loss for them, right? There's now, you don't have Rudy Gobert on every team, but there's a blueprint for how you can try and stop Jokic. This Nuggets team kind of felt like a team of destiny, but this Wolves team is rewriting everything. The passion and energy that they play with through Anthony Edwards, it's super exciting to watch. we talk about a changing of guard a little bit, and I'm not sure if I brought this up in any of our other segments, but I'll definitely get to it in the next segment a little more. I'll just touch on it a little bit here, but all of the stars of yesterday are gone. All of these teams are powered by new age stars, and that was awesome. That second round, it really was. Uh, you're going from LeBron and KD to Anthony Edwards and Luka and Jason Tatum and Jalen Brunson and all these guys that were here in the second round. There's going to be some intense rivalries in the future between some of these guys, and it's really cool to see that the NBA is having a passing of the torch moment. So great news for the NBA. Great series. Timberwolves defense is real. And we will break that down coming up in the next segment, where we're going to do a Western Conference Finals breakdown to end our show, breaking down the series between the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Dallas Mavericks. So stick around for that. We will be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back, everybody, to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished breaking down all of the Game 7s, the historic Game 7s that took place over the weekend, as well as the crazy Game 6 between the Mavericks and the Thunder. We gave our Eastern Conference Finals predictions in Segment 2. Here in Segment 5, we are going to finish off our show with Western Conference Finals predictions. That's right. We have a Western Conference Finals that is almost completely opposite from what I picked at the beginning of these two series. So egg on my face here. But we have the Dallas Mavericks riding high, coming into the playoffs as one of the hotter teams in the league after a huge trade deadline where they got key contributors like Daniel Gafford, and that really helped them in that second round series be able to out physical the Thunder. They're here with led by Luka and led by Kyrie, facing off against another young team led by superstar Anthony Edwards, Defensive Player of the Year, anchoring one of the best defenses in the history of the game of basketball in Rudy Gobert, and the sixth man of the year, Naz Reid, and a really great number 2 option in Karl Anthony Towns. This team has come together, and they're playing some great basketball. Let's break down this series. This Western Conference Finals is a very interesting one to me. Because like I was saying, before I get to that, we have to, we're gonna do a little break here. If you'd like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message will pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you have a burning question about sports, go ahead and leave a comment, leave a donation. I will answer that question for you. Appreciate all your support. Once again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. But like I was saying, this is a really interesting series to me. This this Western Conference Finals between the Mavericks and the Thunder. Because, like I said at the end of segment 4, it's really a changing of the guard, right? You have now these 4 super young teams going off for a chance to win a title. The only star player on any of these teams that has won a title is Kyrie back in Cleveland. And he's not even the main star on that team, so there's a lot to break down here. But here in the Western Conference, you have a battle between one of the best defenses of all time in this Timberwolves team, anchored by a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year, Rudy Gobert. And on the other side, you have one of the best offensive players of all time in offensive player combinations of all time in Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, right? Luka can hit almost any shot from just about anywhere, but as we've seen in that series against the Thunder, if you're really physical with him, you can make him struggle. But he adjusted to it. All fairness to him, down the stretch, games 5 and 6, where he was huge, he was able to put up triple doubles against Lou Dort and that defense, but it still bothered him in those games, even when he was having success. It had to completely shut him down in games 1, 2, and 3, and in games 1 through 4. It completely shut down Lou Dort's defense did. But we're taking a look here at a series between the Mavericks and the Thunder, and we'll take a look at what they've done against each other this season. They played 4 times. Dallas only won 1 of those games, although they were able to score basically 110 points in almost every single game. These have been tight matchups. There's been 1 blowout, or I guess maybe 2 blowouts. But outside of the 1 blowout at the end of January, these 2 teams have matched up pretty well against each other. Again, the Mavericks' defense is a little bit lacking. Their offense can make up for that. This Wolves team is really good. They just faced a really, really tough challenge in Nikola Jokic, and there's nobody on the other team, on the Mavericks, that can do what Jokic does. Daniel Gafford, while he was huge down low for the Mavs against the Thunder, Rudy Gobert should be able to handle him just fine, right? He just came off solid defense against the best basketball player on the planet. Now he gets to play Daniel Gafford. The Thunder, the Timberwolves are not a team that's going to leave PJ Washington wide open in the corner the entire game, right? They're going to devise some defensive scheme. They have the players to guard Luka. You know, they do. Anthony Edwards can go shot for shot with any of those guys, any game. So this is going to be a tough series for the Mavericks. If they can play with physicality, if they can out-rebound and be a little more physical, than the Timberwolves, and then the Timberwolves have been, they have a shot. But the way it is right now, I don't really see a huge chance for the Dallas Mavericks to make a run to the finals. And they're the team I'd be the most surprised by if they make it. And I know I'm saying that with the Pacers on the other side of the board there, but the Pacers and the Mavericks, both of them I don't really expect to win, but you know, both of these teams have done a lot of good. Both of those teams are just running into seemingly juggernauts. All this to say, I think the Timberwolves are going to take this series in 6, much like the other side, setting up a Celtics Timberwolves final. A really, really interesting matchup. You don't think of Minnesota as a basketball city all that often, but and it's been a while. Like I said, before this year, it had been nearly 20 years since they won a playoff series, and they had to go through. They still have to go through a gauntlet. You know, this Mavericks team is not going to be easy. You have Luka, who can drop 40 on you at any moment. You know, you have Kyrie, who has been able to dish it out. Been playing incredible basketball, really. You know, Doncic is almost averaging a triple-double. If there's a guy who can be a triple threat as much as Jokic can be, Doncic is that guy, right? I'm not gonna say he's the second best player in the world, but he's probably a top five. He's a top five player. So you're going from maybe the best in the world to a top five player in the world. It's not going to be necessarily easy, but I do think that this Timberwolves team can and probably will win this series. I have them taking it in 6. They play with intensity. I'm wondering how long they can keep that intensity up. There was some tension there between the Timberwolves and the Nuggets, and I don't really feel that between the Timberwolves and the Mavericks. But the Timberwolves called out the Mavericks. They said Anthony Edwards on a shirt walking out in Game 6 said, "Hey, we want the Mavs. We want the Mavericks." So they got who they wanted. They called them out, and now we just have to see if they're up for the challenge, able to back up those words there. I'm excited to see it. Like I said, I'm taking the Mavericks in. I'm taking the Timberwolves in 6 games. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Who's going to win the Western Conference Finals? What is the most interesting finals matchup? I think maybe the most interesting finals matchup we could see is, storyline-wise, probably the Celtics versus the Mavericks. The best finals is probably going to be Celtics Timberwolves, but we'll have to see. I think any 4 of these teams, like I said, there's going to be a new champion. There's going to be a new star winning a championship, regardless of who wins the NBA Finals. Whether it be Tatum, whether it be Halliburton, whether it be Anthony Edwards, or whether that be Luka Doncic. So very exciting time in the NBA. Changing of the guard is here. This season really feels like the end of an era. But let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. We will be back tomorrow, same time, same place, talking more probably some hockey tomorrow, as the second round, the conference finals will be set after Game 7 tonight, and any other major sports news that comes out in the next 24 hours. I appreciate all of you for sticking around and watching today on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. I will see you then. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up. I'm a product that I guess for me.